The story begins with Galadriel reminiscing about her childhood and her solid and loving relationship with her brother, Finrod. She remembers building a paper boat and keeping it in a small stream to float, but other kids suddenly destroy it. Brooding and saddened, Finrod comes to Galadriel and cheers her up, teaching her some intricate lessons of life. He asks her, "Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?" He answers the question, telling her that the stone sinks because it looks at the dark water, and a ship floats because it looks at the light. Galadriel, meanwhile, tells us the story of how it all began. She tells us that in the beginning, after the two trees of Valinor are destroyed, the elves sail across the sundering seas to wage war against Morgoth and his orcs until Morgoth and his orcs are finally defeated by the elves during a century of fighting. The elves begin hunting for Sauron, a powerful sorcerer and leader of the orcs. The search continued until her brother Finrod died in search of Sauron. She believes evil is not yet obliterated from the earth until Sauron is dead. Galadriel and her team go in search of Sauron in an abandoned castle sitting on a hill. They find some evidence, like traces of black magic and a broken trident, to show that indeed Sauron is alive and may have some hidden plans. While still on their search, Galadriel and her team are attacked by a snow troll. One of her team is nearly killed, but with a bit of skill from Galadriel, she is able to take down the troll and kill it. Her team is shaken and scared. They beg Galadriel for them to return home, but she refuses, stressing the fact that Sauron must be around somewhere plotting evil. Despite her protestations, her team abandons her, and she has no option but to join them to return to the elven capital, Lindon. In Rohovanion, the wildlands east of the Andun, a pair of hunters with enormous part wing, part moose antlers appendages on their way back from a trek from a green and hilly landscape. As they move, the Harfoots, a type of hobbit, creep out of hiding, popping up from tall grasses and out of the tree trunks. A whole hobbit village shakes off the camouflage to come to a bustling, gossiping life. Saurak Burrows is ill at ease. It's uncommon for hunters to come this far and this early. Meanwhile, the Harfoot kids are outside, picking wild berries in the charge of Nori Brandyfoot. It's idyllic, until the Harfoot gleefully show Nori a huge, claw-footed footprint in the mud. She sends the kids quickly home just as a big, furry, and sharp-toothed creature comes into the view. In Lindon, the capital of the High Elves, young Elrond sits, riding in a yellow-leaf tree, when a messenger seeks him out. He receives bad news. He wasn't invited to the next council meeting because he's not an elf lord. The good news, his friend Galadriel arrived, swathed in a shimmering golden gown and sumptuous green velvet. She cleans up well when not battling snow trolls in an evil blizzard-beaten fortress. She tells Elrond about the sigil she found in the stone and wants the king to send her back out, but Elrond warns her not to disobey the king again. Meanwhile, Nori expresses her unhappiness and unfulfillment in life to her mother, unlike the rest of the happily pastoral Harfoots. Nori tells her mom that she can't help but feel there are no wonders in this world that they haven't seen yet. But her mom urges her daughter to find satisfaction there in the village. The Harfoots are the only creatures of Middle-earth who are just responsible to their community, and that the relationship is how they survive. Back in Lindon, Galadriel is feeling the tug of her responsibilities. She and her companions kneel in their armor. Somehow both fierce and luxuriously draped, the elven magic gives them both immortality and impeccable fashion, as High King Gil-galad honors them for their efforts. In the words that Elrond wrote for him, the king insists that the days of war are over. Today, our day of peace begins. Galadriel is unconvinced and even less enthused by the reward. The hero would be escorted to the Grey Havens, her sun-soaked childhood home, to dwell for all eternity in the Blessed Realm, the far west, the undying lands of Valinor. At last, they are going home, but she ponders if Valinor still remains a home for her. While fireworks burst overtake the lake, Galadriel gazes at a statue carved into a living tree, one among many, each lit by the soft glow of a lamp. a memorial grove honoring her brother and those who died with him in battle. Elrond arrives to ply with his friend with wine, but Galadriel is in no mood to celebrate. She can't go home, not until she's rid the world of Morgoth's evil, as Elrond promises that he will take up her task if evil resurfaces. The memorial lights stretch out in both directions behind them, further than the eye can see, a reminder of how much has already been lost. In the Southlands, the lands of men, no one seems happy to see the two elves making their way through town. Arondir arrives at a tavern for his bi-weekly check-in and finds the locals discussing a poisoning. When he asks for more details on the poisoning and is unconvincingly rebuffed, Rohan, an unknown mischief, shouts knife ears to the elf and reiterates that one day our true king will return and pry them right out from under the elves' pointy boots. Arondir goes out back to share charged moments with Bronwyn, a local healer, who seemed way happier to see him than anyone else in town. But Mera reminds Arondir that the elves are here to monitor the town, not flirt with its inhabitants. Elves and humans have only attempted to pair up twice, and both times were tragic. The odds are against Arondir and Bronwyn sharing anything more than significant glances. The chances don't improve upon their return to the outpost. The High King has declared the war is over and disbanded the far outposts. Revion, the Watch Warden, finds Arondir moping atop a watchtower. Revion warns him that they've been assigned to watch these people because of their allegiance to Morgoth. Arondir should be glad to never see them again. But there's one person Arondir absolutely has to see again. He finds Bronwyn at her house and says he has expressed his feelings for her 100 times over in every way but words. But before he could get used to those words, a man brings his cow to be healed, and the inky black goo that Arondir milks from it absolutely kills the romantic mood. He and Bronwyn set out east to check out the area where the cow last grazed. They suspected that it might be related to the mysterious poisonings the tavern goers were discussing. Bronwyn's sons Theo and Rohan, the angry boy from the tavern, sneak into a barn while Rohan taunts Theo about his missing father. Theo is barely listening though, because he was focused on a task at hand. From under the rickety floorboards, he pulls out a broken sword he'd been hiding, clearly exerting a mysterious influence over him. The hilt is surrounded by twisted metal, and on the blade is the telltale sigil of Sauron. If there's one thing Elrond would do, now or 1,000 years from now, it would be sending a woman to the Grey Havens without giving her all the information. As Galadriel and her company sail across the sundering seas, Elrond and King Gil-galad discuss what they foresaw and kept her from. That if Galadriel stayed in Middle-earth, she might keep the evil alive rather than defeating it forever. Galadriel sails to the sunset. King Gil-galad says, with a glint in his eye, "You and I must look to the new sunrise." He tells Elrond he will be working with the Lord Celebrimbor, the greatest of the elven smiths, on a new project. It sounded suspiciously like quid pro, but Elrond had to play along to learn more. On the Sundering Seas, the elves near the Grey Havens, they have their weapons and armor ceremoniously stripped away. Although Galadriel couldn't give up her sword at first, a flock of white seabirds burst through the clouds and encircle the boat as the elves break into a harmonious song. As the ship sails on and the song's crest, the wall of gray clouds before them parts, and a breathtaking golden sunshine streams through the cleft. But Galadriel cannot rejoice in this homecoming. She hears her brother's voice again, asking, "Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?" At this point, a fiery meteor rips through the clouds. The elves on the boat see it. In the Southlands, Arondir and Bronwyn instinctively clasp hands as it burns its path across the sky. Galadriel backs away from the blinding golden light as sea spray falls like rain, like tears, as a younger self asks the same question. How is she to know which lights to follow? We now hear the answer that was only whispered before. Sometimes we cannot know until we have touched the darkness. She has, and now she knows. Galadriel dives overboard into the water. The shimmering light above her and the surfaces just in time to see the wall of clouds close again, shrouding the sea and her in darkness. King Galgalad saw the meteor too. He picks up a golden leaf in its wake and sees its veins turn black and corrosive. But nearest of all to the fireball is Nori, who watches it hit the ground near her village and explode. Ever curious, she follows it to the site of impact, where she finds an unexpected sight: a nearly naked man curled up in the center of the fiery hole. Who is he? How is he lying inside a molten crater? At the elven capital of Lindon, Nor-Gilgalad emphasizes that he is convinced that Galadriel's continued search for Sauron will make the latter endure. The High King Gilgalad, meanwhile, introduces Elrond to the great elven smith, Lord Celebrimbor, who is making a great project, and Gilgalad wants Elrond to assist and be part of it. In the faraway town of Turharan, a small village in the southlands of Middle-earth, word reaches a group of elves who watch over the small village on a tower. One of these elves, Arondir, has fallen in love with a human who is a healer, her name Bronwyn. While she is with her, a villager from another village brings a sick cow to her. The cow had wandered to the nearby village Horden, and when Arondir and Bronwyn investigate the town, they are shocked to discover it in flames. Meanwhile, Bronwyn's son Theo finds a broken sword bearing Sauron's undeniable mark. Across the sundering seas, Galadriel and her company prepare to enter Valinor, which appears as a great light. Galadriel develops second thoughts about abandoning her search for Sauron and jumps out of the ship. At that time, when a meteor flies across Middle-earth and crashes near the Harfoot's camp, Nori finds a strange man in the crate, naked and unconscious amid the hot lava surrounding him. Brandyfoot and Poppy Proudfellow investigate the man inside the meteor crater and are surprised to find him alive amid the cold fire. Ultimately, Nori convinces Poppy to help her get the man to shelter. Poppy disagrees at first, but changes her mind later on. They devised a mechanism that aided their struggle to wheel the man to their proposed hideout, where they provided a makeshift shelter for him. The next day, Nori brings him food and then notices that he doesn't speak the same language as her, but he tries to pass on some information to her and Poppy. Later, they find him looking at the stars. He uses magic to break Poppy's lantern of fireflies and uses those fireflies to arrange a constellation that Nori does not recognize. She, however, believes that the constellation will lead him back home and promises to help him find his home and help him return. In the ruins of Horden, Arondir and Bronwyn find no survivors or bodies. They discover in one of the houses of a hidden tunnel below the house. Arondir enters the tunnel to know where the tunnel leads. Bronwyn goes back to warn the villagers, but she was totally ignored and rebuffed by them. Strange creatures in the tunnel later capture Arondir. Bronwyn returns home to find Theo, her son, hiding from an orc. Together, after a bit of a struggle, they kill the orc and use its head to convince the villagers to flee the town. Together, they all flee to a nearby elven watchtower. Theo brings the broken sword, which appears to draw power from the injury on his wrist. Elrond and Celebrimbor discuss the new project at hand at the elven smith town of Eregion. Celebrimbor discloses that he is building a forge capable of producing a powerful object, but he requires a larger workforce, which the High King Gilgalad cannot provide. Elrond suggests that they look to the dwarves for support and volunteers to travel to Khazad-dûm to meet his old friend, Prince Dervin IV. To the greatest surprise, Elrond discovers he is not welcome there. So, he invokes the right to Sigyn Tarag, a rock-breaking contest between himself and Durin. He is allowed to enter, and the contest begins, but Durin beats him, which wasn't much of a surprise then. Durin then announces that Elrond is banished from all elven lands. Elrond still persists, begs Durin to tell him the true nature of his crime, and Durin bitterly tells Elrond that he has not visited in 20 years, and was not present at his wedding and birth of his children. Elrond apologizes, and his wife Dissa encourages the pair to make up. Durin reluctantly agrees to hear Elrond's proposal, which he then relates to King Durin III. The latter was concerned that Elrond's arrival related to a discovery that the dwarves have made. Swimming back to Middle-earth, Galadriel encounters a raft of stranded humans escaping from a sea creature that destroyed their ship. The creature attacks the raft, leaving only Galadriel and one of the men alive. He introduces himself as Halbrand of the Southlands and explains that he is escaping from orcs who had attacked his homeland. They are caught in a storm, and Halbrand saves Galadriel from drowning. The next morning, the pair are found by a peculiar ship at a construction camp commanded by orcs. Captured Arondir and other captives are digging trenches to enable the orcs to move during the day due to their sensitivity to sunlight. Arondir also finds his fellow elves, Medor and Rivion, who have also been brought there. Together, they plan their escape. When Rivion refuses to cut down a tree, they kill Medor as punishment to Rivion for disobedience, and then gives Arondir an axe to cut the tree, which he agrees to quickly. Arondir, coming up from the trenches they are digging, discovers that the whole area is wasted and desolate. Galadriel and Halbrand are picked up by a ship captained by Elendil, who takes them to Numenor, an island kingdom ruled by men. Relations between the island and the elves have grown strained, and Queen Regent Miriel denies Galadriel's request for a ship back to Middle-earth. Elendil is assigned to watch over Galadriel, and he takes her to the kingdom's Hall of Lore. They discover that the Mark of Sauron is actually a map of the Southlands, where a new realm of evil forces is planned. Halbrand gets into a fight with some of the Númenóreans and is imprisoned. Galadriel finds him and reveals that she knows he is the true king of the Southlands, descended from the man who united the tribes of the Southlands and was loyal to Morgoth. She asks him to return to Middle-earth with her to redeem both their bloodlines. Meanwhile, in the Southlands, Elendil's son Isildur nears the end of his training as a naval cadet. Still, he has been encouraged by his brother, Anarion, to postpone his graduation against Elendil's wishes. The evening before the Harfoots' next migration, the stranger accidentally reveals himself to the rest of the Harfoots while trying to read some star maps. The shocked Harfoots consider exiling Nori Brandyfoot for helping the stranger, but she is forgiven because of her young age. The next day, the Harfoots start migrating, and the Brandyfoots struggle to keep up due to Largo, Nori's father, having an injured ankle. The stranger follows them and helps them with their cart. Arondir, Rivion, and some other captives attempt to escape from the orcs when the sun is the highest. The orcs send a warg to attack them, which Arondir kills. Rivion makes it out of the trenches but is killed by archers. Arondir is unable to get free and is brought before the mysterious orc leader Adar. Mirlel has a vision of Numenor being swallowed and destroyed by a giant tsunami. Galadriel and Elendil present Mirrell with proof that orcs of Sauron are attacking the Southlands in Middle-earth and are desperate to beg her to intervene, which she bluntly refuses. Galadriel had still not given up on her request to see Mirlel's father, who is also the king. King Palantir hasn't been seen for many years. Mirlel gets angry and throws both Galadriel and Elendil into jail. Isildur and his friends, Valandir and Ontamo, are dismissed for their cadet training after Isildur makes a mistake in training while they're being distracted. Back in the Southlands, Arondir meets Adar, the leader and the father of the orcs, who is an elf. He allows Arondir to leave unscathed, but relays a message to him to which he has to path to the Southlanders, taking refuge at an elven tower of Osthryth. Forsake your claims to the Southlands and swear fealty to Adar, or they will be destroyed. Meanwhile, at the camp of Osthryth, where the Southlanders were camping, Theo tries to help, but Bronwyn ignores him. Still persistent in being of help, he and Rohan return to the village to gather food, but they are attacked by orcs. Rohan escapes, but Theo hides in a nearby well. In Eregion, the elves and dwarves are working together to build Celebrimbor's powerful new forge. Celebrimbor believes Durin the Fourth is hiding something, and Elrond goes to investigate. He learns that Durin the Fourth has been mining a new ore that is very light and very strong below Khazad Dûm. Elrond promises to keep the secret and give it a name, Mithril. When the mine collapses, Durin III shuts down further Mithril mining. Durin IV is furious with his father, but Elrond calms him with a story of his father, Arundel, who became a star. Durin IV eventually reconciles with his father, who sends him to Lindon to find out what the elves' intentions are. Halbrand helps Galadriel realize that she should go around Miriel to speak to Tar Palantir directly. Guards arrive to release Galadriel and escort her to Middle-earth. But Galadriel escapes and climbs up the king's tower. She finds the king ill, protected by Miriel. The latter explains that there was a rebellion because the king wanted to renew relations with the elves, and Miriel was placed on the throne instead. After becoming ruler, Miriel was given access to a Palantir crystal ball that first showed her the vision of Numenor's downfall. She showed this vision to Galadriel and explains her disbelief that helping Galadriel will bring upon this catastrophic future. Arondir rescues Theo from the orcs and they return to the tower. Tavern owner Waldreg reveals to Theo that he was a follower of Sauron and explains that the broken sword was a gift for the followers of the Dark Lord. The orcs who attacked Theo know he has the sword and report to Adar that it is in the tower. As Galadriel departs for Middle-earth, the petals of Numenor's white tree begin to fall. Miriel says this signifies the tears of the Valar and changes her mind. She announces that she will personally escort Galadriel to Middle-earth and assist the men of the Southlands. The Harfoot continue their journey to the Grove of the Winter. While looking for food in the forest, Nori Brandyfoot, Poppy Proudfellow, and Malva Meadowgrass were attacked by a pack of wolves. The stranger scares off the wolves with his magic, but injures himself in the process. While trying to heal himself, he nearly hurts Nori Brandyfoot in the process, thus frightening her. Some strange women appear at the scene of the fallen meteorite, the exact spot where the stranger fell from the sky, making the entire situation puzzling. At the Elven Tower of Osterith, Bronwyn attempts to mobilize the other refugees to defend themselves against the invasion of the orcs. Waldreg disagrees with Bronwyn and sees it wiser to ally with the orcs. He stressed that they don't stand the chance against the large army of Sauron. His argument convinces half of the refugees to follow him. When he finally meets the orc army, Waldreg is disappointed that Adar, the leader of the orcs, is not Sauron, but however, still swears fealty to Adar. Adar, still not convinced, asks Waldreg to kill Rohan. At the tower, Theo shows Arondir the broken sword the orcs are hunting for, and Arondir suspects that the broken sword must be the key device to enslave the Southerners. At the other end, Elendil denies his son Isildur's request to join Numenor's expedition to the Southlands, saying Isildur lost his chance to serve previously. Discussing the expedition with the queen, Galadriel says that human Halbrand will be accompanying them to claim the throne of the Southlands. Halbrand later accuses Galadriel of using him and says he wants to remain in the Numenor instead. Meanwhile, Chancellor Farzan's son, Kemen, attempts to convince his father to cancel the expedition to Middle-earth. Still, Farazan sees potential in turning the Southlands into a tributary state after its liberation. Meanwhile, Miriel's father, King Tar Palantir, warns her not to join the expedition to Middle-earth. High King Gil-galad reveals to Elrond that he knows of the existence of Mithril, an ore that contains the light from the lost Silmaril that he believes can counteract the fading power of the elves in Middle-earth. Elrond refuses to confirm that the dwarves have discovered the ore out of loyalty to Prince Durin IV, and Gil-galad accuses him of putting the dwarves before his race. Elrond later discusses the issue with Durin IV, and the latter agrees to help. The pair return to Khazad-dûm to try to convince Durin III. Kemen attempts to destroy the expedition ships that discover Isildur stowing away. Isildur prevents the destruction of the 3 of the 5 ships that save Kemen's life. When questioned by Elendil, Isildur lies about Kemen's sabotage. He subsequently receives a spot on the expedition crew as a stable sweep. Galadriel ultimately apologizes for using Halbrand and opens up to him, and he eventually decides to go with the expeditionary force, and the remaining ships then depart for Middle-earth. The battle between the orcs and humans rages on the Southlands as an army of orcs advances, destroying all in their way. Adar stands in front of the Sea of Fire, hundreds of orcs holding torches aloft a night, with the murderous Waldreg in the front row. Adar motivates his orcs by telling them that, before this night is through, some of us will fall. For the first time, we do so not as unnamed slaves in fairway lands, but as brothers and sisters in our home. Adar called out. War drums and orcs' guttural growls score their march to the elven fortress, Adar at their head. But when they push open the door, the courtyard is abandoned. He becomes disappointed with the army of orcs to find the Tower of Osterith abandoned. As the orcs scour the fortress, Adar glares at the carving of the hilt and Sauron's skeletal visage. Waldreg grovels to his lord father Adar, asking about what had happened to Sauron. Still, before he can answer, Arondir pops up from behind a parapet, like the most graceful whack-a-mole one has ever seen. They fire arrows into the orcs below and the ropes that hold the tower's scaffolding together. He leaps down to the bridge with cat-like agility and takes off. Arondir gleams from the scaffolding and flies off the tower as the rope snaps. As Waldreg begs an impassive Adar to move, the tower finally collapses on itself, seeming to trap Adar and his army beneath its crushing burning weight. From the valley below, the Southland cheers, but Bronwyn knows the fight is not done, and so they have to make the village ready for the second invasion of the orcs. Meanwhile, in the Sundering Seas, Numenor's ships glide through the night. While Halbrand lies awake, Isildur rises to clean the stables and share an apple with his horse buddy Beric. He wanders up on deck, where armor-clad Galadriel spots him. She tells him that humility has saved entire kingdoms that the proud have all but led to ruin, as he admits with shame that his rank is a stable sweep. Meanwhile, Elendil informs Miriel that it's a day sail up the river and another day's ride to the Southlands. She wants to make haste as time is no longer on their side. Drifting back, Arondir attempts to destroy the broken sword that the orcs are searching for, but he is unable to do it with conventional tools. He tells the human healer Bronwyn that he will hide it as their son Theo watches on from a distance. Arondir helps the town prepare for the next assault. He professes his love to Bronwyn and promises a life together with her and Theo after the battle is over. That night, the orc army enters Tirharad. The townspeople trap the orcs in the center of the village and are victorious, but soon realizes that many of the enemies they killed were their neighbors, who joined Adar and had been disguised as orcs. The townspeople are horrified by their actions. Orc archers shoot the townsfolks, killing and wounding many. Bronwyn is hit in the shoulder. Taking refuge in the tavern, Theo and Arondir cauterize Bronwyn's wound. Adar enters and demands the location of the broken sword. Arondir attempts to negotiate, but the orcs continue to kill people. When Bronwyn is threatened, Theo reveals the sword and gives it to Adar. Adar orders the rest of the humans to be killed, but the Númenórean army arrives on horseback and either kills or captures the remaining orcs. Adar gives Waldreg a task before attempting to escape, only to be captured by Galadriel and Halbrand. Galadriel interrogates Adar, discussing that he is an elf who was corrupted by the first Dark Lord, Morgoth, and turned into one of the first orcs. He claims to have killed the second Dark Lord, Sauron, and is now focused on creating a home for all the orcs. Halbrand is hailed as the king of the Southlands, and the Númenóreans celebrate victory. Theo realizes that the broken sword is missing as Waldreg uses it to unlock the dam beside Osterith. Water rushes into the tunnels that the orcs dug into the mountain Orodruin. The water enters a lava chamber beneath the mountain, and the resulting pressure causes an eruption that spews lava, ash, and smoke over the Southlands. The elf Galadriel wakes up covered in ash following the eruption of the mountain Orodruin. The village of Tirharad is covered in ash and fire, with many dead and injured. Galadriel finds the human boy Theo, and together, they continue making their way out of the Southlands. Númenórean soldiers Isildur and Valendil find their friend Ontamo dead. They help the queen rescue survivors from burning buildings, but it collapses, and the queen loses her eyesight. Isildur is presumed dead in the collapse. The Harfoots finish their migration to the Grove, an orchard destroyed by the nearby volcano. They ask the magical stranger who has joined them to help them fix the orchard, but his attempts lead to a large tree branch landing on Nori and Dilly Brandyfoot. Scared, the Harfoots decide the stranger should leave. Harfoot elder Sadoc Burrows gives him directions to a nearby settlement of men, and the stranger departs. The next day, the Harfoot awakes to find the whole orchard regrown. That night, a trio of mysterious women arrive searching for the stranger. Nori attempts to send them in the wrong direction, but the woman uses magic to burn all of the Harfoot's caravans and then continue after the stranger. Nori decides to go after him to warn him of the danger and is accompanied by her friend Poppy, her mother Marigold, and Sadoc. Galadriel and Theo bond over their shared guilt for the events leading to the eruption, and Galadriel discusses her husband Celeborn, whom she believes to be dead. They eventually reach Númenórean camp, outside of the Southlands, where Theo is reunited with his mother, Bronwyn, and her beloved, the elf Arondir. Isildur's father, Elendil, learns of his son's loss and despairs, regretting his part in joining Galadriel's quest to lead to this moment. When Isildur's horse cannot be calmed, Elendil lets the horse gallop off. Before the Númenóreans depart Middle-earth in their ships, Miriel promises to return and seek vengeance against the enemy. Galadriel reunited with Halbrand, the king of the Southlands, who was gravely injured during the eruption. She helps him ride north to receive elvish medicine. The other human survivors seek refuge in nearby Pelargir. In Khazad-dûm, the elf Elrond and dwarf prince Durin IV ask Durin III for permission to mine the new ore so that it can be used to counteract the fading of the power of the elves in Middle-earth. Durin III refuses, believing the ore to be dangerous to mine. As Elrond departs with a tearful farewell for Durin IV and his wife Dissa, Durin IV sees proof that Mithril can save the elves and decides to mine it with Elrond in secret. They find a large deposit of the ore, but are caught by Durin III. Elrond is banished, taking a small piece of Mithril with him, and Durin IV is stripped of his royal status despite Prince Durin IV begging and pleading with his father. His father feels that Prince Durin still has much to learn and has betrayed his people by choosing the elves before them. Prince Durin disagrees and reminds his father that Elrond has been his longtime friend and they need his help. But King Durin posits that the elf shouldn't keep cheating nature. They should either return to their homes or die like the rest. Prince Durin angers his father more with his constant vituperation of words and tells him how disappointing he is as a king and as a father. In retaliation, King Durin strips his son of all royal appendages and duties, and also all responsibilities that come with it. Durin III orders that Mithril mine to be sealed. Unbeknownst to them, a Balrog lives deep below that mine. In the Southlands, the orcs and their human allies name their leader Adar, Lord of the Southlands. He proclaims that the place no longer exists. It is now known as the Land of Mordor. The Harfoots, Nori, Poppy, Marigold, and Sadoc search for the stranger, their friend in the Greenwood. Still, he is first found by a trio of mysterious women known as the Dweller, the Nomad, and the Aesthetic. They tell him he is their Lord Sauron, and plans to restore his memory and power. In Eregion, the elvensmith Celebrimbor believes they do not have enough of the ore Mithril to counteract the fading of the elven power in Middle-earth. As he and Elrond prepare to inform the High King, Galadriel arrives with the gravely injured human Halbrand, the king of the Southlands. As Halbrand begins to recover, he grows interest in the Celebrimbor's work and suggests a way to create one of the small objects with Mithril that they would have the power of both the seen and unseen world. Gil-galad is against the idea, but Galadriel convinces him that it is worth trying. Still, she grows suspicious of Halbrand and asks for records of his lineage. With the king of Numenor, Tal Palantir, growing ill, Chancellor Pharazôn organizes members of the Builders Guild to begin designing a tomb. Apprentice Arian is given an hour by the king's bed to plan a design, during which the king awakens and mistakes her for his daughter, Queen Muriel. He leads her up the tower to a Palantir crystal ball and warns her not to look into it too long. The king dies soon afterward. Muriel and Aaron's father, Elendil, return to Middle-earth. The Harfoots find the stranger and attempt to rescue him from the woman, but the woman kills Sadok and nearly kills the others. The stranger, regaining his memories and receiving encouragement from Nori, uses the magic staff of the Dwellers to reveal the dark, true forms of the women and banish them back to the unseen world. Before they go, they realize he is not Sauron, but rather Istar. Nori, Marigold, and Poppy return with the stranger to the other Harfoots, where he explains that the Istar means wizard, and he needs to travel east to the land of Rune to learn more about his powers and purpose. With the encouragement of her family, Nori goes with him. Halbrand and Celebrimbor work together to combine Mithril with other elements and decide that they will need 2 small circular objects. Galadriel receives records on the kings of the Southlands and realizes that Halbrand is not who he says he is. She confronts him and he reveals himself as the Dark Lord Sauron in disguise. He tells her that he has been telling her the truth of his intentions all along and asks her to join him as a Dark Queen and rule Middle-earth with her. She refuses and almost drowns before fleeing to Mordor. She is saddened by the very fact that she had the opportunity to seize Sauron, but couldn't. She feels disappointed and enraged that she has let her brother down. While she still lies by the riverside, she is discovered by Elrond, who inquires what is she doing lying like that. Still, she chooses not to reveal this information to Celebrimbor and Elrond. To do so would tarnish his faith in her and even call her loyalty into question. She also suggests that the 3 rings must now be forged rather than a single crown, as 1 would corrupt its wearer and 2 would divide the bearers. Forged they are by Celebrimbor, who's finally figured out how to bend Mithril to his will, with an assist from Halbrand/Sauron, and its striking as well. 1 clear, 1 red, and 1 blue, thereby forming the 3 objects instead of 2. 1 will corrupt, 2 will divide, but 3, there is balance. Elrond finds the records and deduces what happens, but it's too late. 3 rings of power are forged. What happens next from there?